There's this statistical reality in the business world that just totally defies common sense when you first hear it.
Oh, yeah, it really does.
Like, it's one of those numbers that completely forces you to reevaluate how everything actually works. Because if you look at any large sales organization, the top 20% of the salespeople make 80% of the money.
Right, which is just the classic Pareto principle.
Exactly. And that's interesting enough on its own, right? But if you drill down into the math, it gets just exponentially crazier.
It really does.
Because if you take the top 20% of that top 20%, so we were talking about just the top 4% of all the people out there selling, they make 80% of that money.
Yeah, the concentration of wealth there is just staggering.
It is. So, I mean, if you are sitting at your desk right now, just grinding away, trying to hit a quota, or even just trying to get your ideas heard by your boss, you really have to ask yourself a deeply uncomfortable question.
Which is what?
Well, are those people in the top 4% actually 10 or 20 times smarter than you? Are they somehow managing to work 20 times the hours? Or do they just possess some kind of superhuman hypnotic charisma that was hard-coded into their DNA, and the rest of us are just, totally out of luck?
I mean, it's the most natural assumption in the world to make, right? When human beings see a massive disparity in outcomes like that, our brains immediately look for a massive difference in inputs.
Yeah, we want a clean explanation.
Exactly. Or we look for raw talent to explain it. We desperately want to believe that the billionaire works a billion times harder, or that the top performer is fundamentally a totally different species of human.
But they aren't, right?
No, absolutely not. If you actually look at the data, and particularly at the source text for our discussion today, the answer to all of those questions is definitively no.
So they aren't smarter.
They aren't smarter. They certainly aren't working 20-hour days. The concept that actually explains this massive gap is something called the winning edge.
The winning edge. Okay, I like that.
Yeah, and to really grasp it, you kind of have to look outside of the corporate world for a second and look at horse racing.
Oh, horse racing. Okay.
Right. When a horse runs in a major race and wins by a nose, it might win, say, $100,000.
Okay, sure.
But the horse that comes in second, losing by just a microscopic fraction of an inch, might win only $10,000.
Wow. Okay, so the winning horse takes home 10 times the prize money.
Exactly. But you have to ask, is that winning horse actually 10 times faster?
Well, no, mathematically, it's probably less than 1% faster. It just happened to cross that arbitrary line a millisecond sooner.
Precisely. It is literally just a nose faster. But because horse racing, much like sales, and honestly, much like pitching an idea to a board of directors, is a winner-take-all game.
Right, there's no second-place trophy in sales.
Exactly. That fractional microscopic advantage translates into a 1,000% difference in the outcome.
Because you don't get a proportional consolation prize for almost closing a massive deal.
No, the company doesn't give you 50% of the commission just because the prospect really liked your slide deck before they went and bought from your competitor.
Yeah, it is a completely binary system. You either get the contract or you don't.
Right. So the winning edge principle basically states that you do not need to be vastly superior to your competition.
You just need to be a little bit better.
Yes. You just need to be maybe 3 or 4% better in a few critical, highly specific areas of human interaction.
And if you can maintain that tiny edge consistently, the compound interest on those wins will just create an absolute explosion in your income and your career trajectory.
That is exactly it.
I mean, that is a staggering promise, but it also feels incredibly liberating to hear.
It should feel liberating.
Because it means the gap between the struggling and dominating isn't this impossible chasm. It's just a few millimeters of technique and mindset.
Just a few millimeters.
So we are doing a deep dive today into a foundational text that breaks down exactly how to acquire those millimeters. It's called The Psychology of Selling by Brian Tracy.
A total classic in the field.
It really is. And before we get into the actual mechanics of this winning edge, I think we have to talk about Tracy himself for a minute.
Oh, absolutely. His background is crucial here.
Because if you have this image in your head of some privileged guy who went to an Ivy League school and inherited a golden Rolodex from his father, you have the completely wrong idea.
Yeah, totally wrong.
This guy's background is about as gritty as it gets. I mean, he didn't even graduate high school.
Right. And his origin story is exactly what makes the psychology in this book so potent, because it was forged in actual literal desperation, not in a classroom.
So what was he doing before all this?
Well, Tracy spent his early years doing really grueling manual labor. He actually worked his way across the North Atlantic on a Norwegian freighter.
Wow, that is not your typical corporate background.
No, not at all. He was washing cars, digging ditches, doing whatever odd jobs he could find across different continents. He was often missing meals and just barely surviving.
So how did he end up in sales?
Eventually, purely out of necessity, because he just couldn't find any more manual labor to pay for his next meal, he fell into sales.
Just stumbled into it.
Yeah, and I say fell into it because it wasn't some strategic career move. It was literally the only job that would hire someone with no high school diploma and no resume.
And he started out doing what he calls the mud against the wall method, right?
Yes, the mud against the wall method, which is the exact trap so many people fall into when they start out.
Where you just pitch everyone with a pulse.
Exactly. You talk as fast as you can, and you just hope that by sheer statistical luck, somebody, somewhere, throws you a bone.
Man, that sounds like an exhausting way to live. Running from door to door, getting doors slammed in your face all day.
It is brutal, getting louder and more aggressive when people try to brush you off, just clinging to survival by your fingernails.
You can almost feel the cortisol and the panic in that kind of existence.
And that panic destroys your ability to actually connect with people, which is exactly why so many people burn out of the profession within just a few months.
So what changed for him? Because he didn't stay stuck there.
The turning point for Tracy, the moment that eventually led to this entire philosophy, happened when the pain of failure finally outweighed his own ego.
Meaning what, exactly?
Well, he looked across the room at the top salesperson in his office. This was a guy who was making 10 times what Tracy was making, but he didn't seem to be working any harder.
Right.
So Tracy just swallowed his pride, walked over, and asked a very simple question. He said, "What are you doing differently than me?"
That takes some guts.
It does. And to Tracy's shock, the top guy didn't hide his secrets. He actually sat him down and walked him through a professional, structured, psychologically sound sales presentation.
So it wasn't just throwing mud, there was an actual architecture to it.
Precisely. There was a system. And this realization just hit Tracy like a lightning bolt.
I bet.
It led him to discover what he calls the law of cause and effect.
Okay, break that down for us.
He realized that in human interactions, success is not some random accident of the universe. And failure isn't an accident either.
It's all predictable.
Exactly. Persuasion, selling, getting people to agree with you, these are learnable, predictable skills, just like learning to drive a car or play the piano.
So success leaves tracks.
Yes, success leaves tracks. If you study the tracks of successful people and do what they do over and over, you will eventually trigger the exact same psychological effects in your buyers.
Yeah.
You will get the exact same results.
It is a system of inputs and outputs.
100%.
Now, I want to interject here because if you are listening to this and thinking, well, my job title is software engineer or marketing manager, or maybe you're a stay-at-home parent, so the sales stuff doesn't apply to me, we really need to reframe that immediately.
Oh, absolutely. We are all in sales.
Exactly. As Tracy points out, businesses are the only true creators of wealth in a society. They pay the salaries, they generate the taxes that build the infrastructure.
Right.
And salespeople, the people who actually convince a human being to part with their money in exchange for value, they are the spark plugs of that entire global economic engine.
It's the engine that runs everything.
Yeah, without that transaction, the most sophisticated software in the world is totally useless. But even beyond the corporate structure, we are all selling constantly.
Every single day.
If you are trying to pitch a new initiative to your stubborn boss, you are selling.
Yep.
If you are trying to persuade your partner to move to a new city or even just trying to negotiate with a toddler to eat their vegetables, you are dealing with the exact same mechanisms of human resistance and persuasion.
It's all the same psychology.
So understanding how to navigate that is arguably the single most important life skill you can ever develop.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
And that actually brings us perfectly to the core thesis of Tracy's entire philosophy.
Lay it on us.
If you want to master that skill, if you want to multiply your effectiveness and your income, you have to fundamentally change your view of what selling actually is.
Okay, how do most people view it?
Most people think it's just a mechanical process. You learn the right scripts, you practice the right handshakes, you memorize the exact rebuttal to every possible objection.
Like reading from a textbook.
Right. But Tracy argues that success in selling is fundamentally 100% an inner game.
An inner game.
Yes. The external mechanics only work if your internal psychology is properly calibrated.
So the mechanics are secondary.
Exactly. He argues that if you can master your own internal self-concept, what he calls your mental thermostat, And if you can train yourself to appeal entirely to the emotional rather than the logical needs of the person across from you, you can systematically engineer breakthroughs in your life.
It is an inside-out process.
That's the perfect way to phrase it. You fix yourself first, and the external world bends to match it.
That phrase, the mental thermostat, is such a powerful metaphor. I really want to spend some real time here because this seems to be the foundation everything else is built on.
It is. It's the bedrock.
Tracy talks about the subconscious mind essentially acting as a master operating system. And we don't just have one broad, generic view of ourselves, right?
No, we have all these highly specific, compartmentalized mini self-concepts for every single area of our lives.
Like you have a self-concept for how good of a driver you are.
Right, or how attractive you are, or how good of a parent you are.
And crucially, you have a very specific hardwired number in your head for exactly how much money you fundamentally believe you deserve to make.
Yes. It is probably the most profound psychological insight in the text, and it's actually rooted in the science of cybernetics.
Cybernetics, like self-regulating system.
Exactly. In the same way that a guided missile constantly course corrects to hit a target, your subconscious mind constantly course corrects your behavior to hit the target of your self-concept.
That is wild.
It is. Tracy states that your actual income will almost never deviate from your internal self-concept by more than about 10%.
So if I see myself a certain way,
If you subconsciously see yourself as, say, a $50,000 a year person, your brain will literally regulate your day-to-day actions to keep you right in that pocket.
and it doesn't just hold you back from the bottom, right? It actively attacks you if you start succeeding too much.
Yes, that is the craziest part.
The book has that wild story about the farm boy selling satellite dishes.
Oh man, that story perfectly illustrates the sheer physical power of the subconscious mind.
Walk us through that one.
So Tracy talks about this young man who grew up in a very poor farming community. His internal thermostat, his baseline expectation for his own life, was set very, very low regarding money.
Okay, makes sense given his background.
Right. So he moved to the city and got a job selling massive satellite dishes to farmers. Now, it just so happened that the harvest was record-breaking that year.
Oh, perfect timing.
Exactly. The farmers were completely flush with cash, and they were buying these expensive $5,000 satellite dishes with both hands.
Just throwing money at him?
Right. So this young salesman, just by being in the right place at the right time, started making money faster than he had ever consciously dreamed possible.
And consciously, you would expect him to be ecstatic, right? You'd expect him to be out celebrating, buying a new car, calling everyone back home to brag.
Consciously, yeah, of course. But subconsciously, his nervous system was experiencing a massive trauma.
Trauma from making too much money.
Yes, because his external reality, these giant commission checks, was violently out of sync with his internal identity as a poor farm boy.
So how did that manifest?
It actually short-circuited his brain. Tracy notes that after making a few huge sales on a Monday or Tuesday, this kid would literally go back to his apartment, turn off all the lights, crawl into bed, pull the heavy covers completely over his head, and just lie there in the pitch black with his heart pounding in his chest.
Wait, are you serious? He literally hid under the covers.
Literally hid under the covers. The psychological stress of exceeding his self-concept was manifesting as actual physical illness.
That is unbelievable.
He had to hide in the dark until his nervous system calmed down, which meant he stopped selling for the rest of the week, effectively sabotaging his own success to bring his income back down to a level his brain felt was safe.
Okay, I have to jump in here because it is exactly like the climate control in a modern house.
Yes, exactly like that.
If your internal thermostat is hardwired to 70 degrees and suddenly a heat wave hits and the house gets up to 85 degrees, which in this metaphor is you having a record-breaking sales month,
Right.
the system doesn't just say, oh, nice, it's warm.
No, it freaks out.
The system detects an anomaly and violently kicks on the air conditioning to freeze you back down to 70.
That is the perfect analogy.
And in real life, that air conditioning looks like sudden procrastination, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Like you hit your quota by the 15th of the month, and suddenly you feel this overwhelming urge to spend 3 hours organizing your email folders instead of making calls.
Or you start sleeping through your alarm.
Right. Or you hit a big commission, and you immediately go to the casino or buy a boat you don't even need, subconsciously draining your bank account to get back to the financial stress level your brain recognizes as home.
It is self-sabotage by design.
But here's where I always get stuck with this kind of psychology. We all know people who self-sabotage. You might even recognize it in ourselves. But how do you actually get your hands into the wiring and change the thermostat?
Yeah, that's the hard part.
Because you can't just look in the mirror and decide to have a different subconscious. The brain doesn't work like that.
That is the million-dollar question right there. If we are prisoners of our self-concept, how do we actually stage a jailbreak?
Right. How do we fix the AC?
Tracy's approach is deeply practical, and it heavily relies on the concept of neuroplasticity, even if he frames it in more accessible terms.
Okay, so it's grounded in science.
Yes, your subconscious mind is incredibly powerful, but it is also remarkably literal and honestly somewhat dumb.
Dumb how?
It's like a computer processor.
Yeah.
It doesn't judge the code it receives, it
Uh-huh.
just runs it. It obeys whatever mental commands you feed it most frequently and with the most emotion.
So what's his solution?
Tracy suggests that the most direct way to reprogram the thermostat is through deliberate, highly emotional, positive affirmations. Specifically, controlling your inner dialogue before high-stress situations.
What kind of affirmations are we talking about?
He advocates for aggressively repeating the phrase, I like myself. I like myself. I like myself.
Okay, I have to be honest here, and I know a lot of people listening are feeling the exact same way.
I know what you're going to say.
Repeating, like, myself in the mirror sounds like a total parody of a 1990s self-help seminar.
Oh, it really does.
It sounds like Stuart Smalley from Saturday Night Live. It feels deeply cheesy and almost embarrassing to even think about doing.
It absolutely feels cheesy at first. There's no getting around that. Our culture trains us to be cynical, and self-deprecation is pretty much our default setting.
Yeah, it's how we relate to each other.
But if you look past the cultural cringe,
Hmm.
there's hard neuroscience at play here.
Okay, explain the science.
Your brain chemistry responds to your internal monologue. When you repeat a phrase like, I like myself with genuine energy and enthusiasm, you aren't just making a wish.
You're doing something physical.
Yes, you are forcing your brain to release endorphins and dopamine. You are deliberately triggering a chemical change that creates a generalized physiological state of confidence.
So it actually changes your body chemistry.
Exactly. Tracy refers to your baseline level of self-esteem as the reactor core of your self-concept.
So it's not magic, it's just chemistry.
Exactly. It's self-directed chemistry. Think about the mechanics of rejection for a second. Why are we so terrified of someone saying no to us?
Because it hurts.
Right, but why? Evolutionarily, being rejected by the tribe meant you were going to starve to death in the wilderness. Our brains process social rejection using the exact same neural pathways that process actual physical pain.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense.
But if your internal reactor core is fully charged, if your self-esteem is genuinely high because you've been programming it, the external rejection just doesn't hurt as much.
It just bounces right off.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And more importantly, when you genuinely like yourself, that internal security radiates outward. You naturally become more relaxed, more empathetic, and you genuinely start to like other people more.
And people pick up on that.
Human beings are incredibly sensitive to that. If a prospect subconsciously senses that you are comfortable in your own skin and that you genuinely like them, their own defenses drop. They instantly trust you more.
Which actually leads to one of the most counterintuitive but fascinating strategies in the entire book.
Oh, the momentum play.
Yes. Because of this neurochemical dynamic we're talking about, Tracy points out something incredible about timing. If we follow this logic, the absolute best, most optimal time to make a massive sale
Is about 10 seconds after you just made a massive sale.
Exactly. It blew my mind when I read that.
It is the ultimate momentum play. Think about how you feel right after you finally close a deal you've been working on for months.
You feel invincible. I mean, you feel like you could walk through a brick wall.
Right. Your self-esteem is peaking. Your internal thermostat has temporarily flared up to 100 degrees.
You're just vibrating with endorphins.
Yes, your posture is perfect, your voice is resonant and calm. But what do most amateurs do when they get that high?
They immediately pack up their briefcase, call it a day, and go to the local bar to celebrate with their colleagues.
And Tracy says that is the biggest mistake you can possibly make.
Really? Why?
Because when you are in that hyper-confident, neurochemically optimized state, you don't go celebrate. You immediately get in your car, drive to the office of the single toughest, meanest, most resistant prospect on your list, and you pitch them.
Because you literally aren't the same person you were 3 hours ago.
Exactly.
The product is identical, the pricing sheet is identical, the PowerPoint is identical, but the human being delivering it has been chemically altered by success,
And the prospect will pick up on that immediately.
even if they don't know why.
Right. They won't know why, but they will sense a total lack of desperation. They will sense an aura of competence and authority. And on a purely subconscious level, they will feel a magnetic desire to do business with you.
Because you are transferring your internal certainty directly into their brain.
You're giving them your confidence.
Okay, so we've established the absolute necessity of the inner game.
Yes.
We have to recalibrate the thermostat, we have to endure the cheesy affirmations until they alter our brain chemistry, and we have to protect our reactor core of self-esteem.
That's step one.
But eventually, you do have to step out of your own head, right?
Yes, you do.
You have to walk into a boardroom or log onto a Zoom call and actually look at the person sitting across from you. And that requires a massive paradigm shift in how we understand human motivation.
It's a huge shift.
So why do people actually part with their money?
This is where all that internal work really pays off.
Yeah.
Because your self-esteem is now secure, you don't need validation from the prospect anymore.
You're not looking for a friend.
Exactly. You can finally stop worrying about yourself, stop worrying about how you look, or if you're going to stumble over your words, and you can focus 100% of your cognitive energy on the buyer.
And what's the golden rule there?
The fundamental, inescapable law of human nature that you must accept is this. People buy for their reasons, not yours.
Their reason's not your
They
hair.
do not care about your quota. They do not care about your mortgage. Every single human being on Earth is walking around with invisible headphones on, and they are all tuned into the exact same radio station 24 hours a day.
WIIFM.
WIIFM. What's in it for me?
What's in it for me?
It is literally the only frequency they can hear. If your presentation is broadcasting on any other frequency, like how great your company is or how many awards your product won, it is just static to them.
It's just noise.
Mm.
But if we assume everyone is just acting out of pure self-interest, how do we tap into that? The book breaks down two primary drivers, right?
Yes, two main drivers.
The desire for gain and the fear of loss. But the weighting of those two things is what I found completely shocking.
It is shocking, but it aligns perfectly with evolutionary biology.
Okay, break down the numbers for us.
Tracy outlines that the desire for gain, so that's the ambition to improve your life, make more money, be more attractive, have more free time, is a powerful motivator.
Sure, we all want those things.
Let's give it a baseline motivational power of 1.0.
Okay, 1.0.
But the fear of loss, the terror of making a mistake, of losing money, of looking foolish in front of your boss, of missing out on a limited opportunity, that has a negative motivational power of 2.5.
Wait, let's just make sure we really grasp that.
It's huge.
You were saying that the fear of losing something is 2.5 times more powerful in driving human behavior than the prospect of gaining the exact same thing.
Exactly. And this is heavily supported by behavioral economics, specifically Daniel Kahneman's work on prospect theory.
Right, thinking fast and slow.
Yes. In the ancestral environment, if you missed out on a chance to gain a slightly better piece of fruit, you were fine. But if you failed to fear the loss of your life to a predator, you died.
So we are literally hardwired to prioritize threat over opportunity.
We are hardwired to prioritize threat and loss. In a modern context, it means a prospect is 2.5 times more motivated to buy a security system if you focus on the agonizing trauma of their house being robbed and losing their family heirlooms than if you focus on the positive gain of just feeling safe.
Wow. This explains so much about corporate inertia.
How so?
Well, if I'm a mid-level manager and someone pitches me a new software that might increase our productivity by 20%, that's a gain.
Right, a 1.0.
I might be mildly interested. But if implementing that software causes a crash that takes the system offline for a day, I will probably get fired. That's a loss.
A 2.5.
Exactly. My fear of being fired is 2.5 times stronger than my desire to look like a hero for a 20% bump. So I just say no to everything to protect myself.
Which is incredibly common.
The fear of making a mistake is this massive, invisible fortress you have to breach.
Which is exactly why you cannot breach it with logic.
Okay.
Logic does not overcome primal fear.
So what do you do?
You have to bypass the logical filters completely and find the emotional core. There's a story in the text that has become legendary in sales circles precisely because it so perfectly illustrates this dynamic.
Oh, is this the flowering cherry tree anecdote?
Yes, the flowering cherry tree.
This is brilliant. So the setup is that a real estate agent is trying to sell a house to a young couple.
Right.
And objectively, rationally, this house is a disaster. It needs a massive amount of work.
It's a total fixer-upper.
Yeah. The paint on the outside is peeling off in sheets. The carpets are stained and need to be ripped out. The kitchen looks like it hasn't been updated since the 1970s.
Sounds terrible.
If you look at it logically, it's a terrible buy unless it's dirt cheap.
Right. So the couple is walking through the house, and their logical brains are just tallying up the massive amount of work and money this is going to.
They're terrified of making a mistake.
Exactly. But the real estate agent is incredibly observant. As they walk into the master bedroom, the agent looks out the window and notices that right smack in the middle of the backyard, there is an enormous, magnificent flowering cherry tree.
Okay.
It is in full bloom, absolutely breathtaking.
So instead of trying to logically argue with the couple about the carpets, like saying, oh, well, carpet is cheap to replace, the agent just waits.
Smart move.
As the wife is complaining about the ugly wallpaper in the bedroom, the agent gently touches her arm, points at the window, and says, yes, but look at that beautiful view of the flowering cherry tree.
And in that single moment, the entire chemical state of the buyer changes.
Just from looking at a tree.
Yes. The woman looks at the tree and she completely stops seeing the peeling paint. Her emotional brain takes over.
She starts picturing it.
Exactly. She instantly imagines waking up on a Sunday morning, sunlight streaming in, drinking a cup of coffee with her husband, and looking out at those pink blossoms. She imagines her kids playing under the branches.
She envisions an entire, beautiful, peaceful life centered around that one tree.
And by the time they get downstairs, the conversation has completely flipped. They aren't talking about the plumbing anymore. They're talking about where to put the sofa so they can see the tree.
Wow.
The cherry tree was the emotional hot button. It completely bypassed the logical objections. And that leads to a profound paradigm shift for anyone trying to persuade. Tracy uses this fantastic analogy of a pipeline.
A pipeline, okay.
When you work at a company, you are naturally obsessed with the pipeline itself. You know how the product is made, you know the technical specifications, the gigabytes, the supply chain logistics.
Because you're proud of it. You spent 2 years engineering it.
Exactly. So when you talk to a customer, you naturally want to talk about what the product is.
Right.
But the customer is standing at the very end of the pipeline with a bucket. They do not care if the pipe is made of copper or PVC.
They just want the water.
They only care about what liquid drops into their bucket at the end. They only care about what the product does for them.
So you have to move from an is paradigm to a does paradigm.
Yes, if you are selling life insurance, you are not selling a 30-year term policy with a decreasing premium structure and an actuarial table.
No one wants to buy an actuarial table.
That is what it is. Nobody wakes up in a cold sweat wanting an actuarial table. You are selling peace of mind.
Right.
You are selling the absolute emotional certainty that if the prospect dies tomorrow, their children will still go to college and their spouse won't lose the house. That is what it does.
Okay, let me push back here just a bit, because this is where the philosophy can feel a little bit reductive to me.
Sure, push back.
If human beings are purely emotional creatures, driven entirely by loss aversion and visions of cherry trees and peace of mind, why do we even bother printing out spec sheets?
That's a fair question.
Like, why do we have white papers and ROI calculators and massive technical manuals? If it's all just emotion, do facts even matter at all in the modern world?
That is a really critical distinction, because if you only sell on emotion, you are going to create a massive problem down the line.
Okay, how so?
Tracy's golden rule bridges this gap perfectly. He says people decide emotionally, and then they justify logically.
Decide emotionally, justify logically.
The sequence is non-negotiable. The emotional hot button, the cherry tree, is the engine that creates the desire to act. But logic is the anchor.
I see.
If you whip a prospect into an emotional frenzy and they buy, but you haven't provided any logical bedrock, what happens the next morning?
Buyer's remorse. Massive, sickening buyer's remorse.
Exactly. They wake up, the endorphins fade, and their rational brain looks at the invoice and just panics.
Oh, man.
Or worse, they have to go into their boss's office or sit down at the kitchen table with their spouse and explain why they just spent $50,000.
And if they say, I bought this software because it makes me feel peaceful like a cherry tree.
They are going to get fired.
Yeah, that won't fly.
You absolutely must supply the unshakable logic, the durability specs, the guaranteed ROI, the technical superiority.
So they have an excuse.
Yes, so that the buyer has the ammunition to rationally defend the emotional decision they already made. You need the emotional sail to move the boat, but you need the logical keel to keep it from capsizing.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
The logic is basically a defensive weapon for the buyer to protect themselves against criticism later on.
Exactly.
But this brings up a massive practical hurdle. Finding that emotional hot button, finding the cherry tree in the first place, is incredibly difficult, isn't it?
Oh, it's the hardest part.
Because people do not walk into a meeting wearing a t-shirt that says, "Hey, I am deeply insecure about my status in this company. Please pitch me something that makes me look smart."
No, they definitely don't.
They hide their actual desires behind layers of professional jargon and stoicism. So how do we actually extract that emotional truth?
You extract it by fundamentally changing your role in the room.
What do you mean?
Most salespeople see themselves as performers. They walk in, turn on the charm, and do a tap dance.
Yeah, the classic pitch.
But Tracy argues that the true professionals see themselves as diagnosticians. They adopt the persona of a doctor of selling.
A doctor of selling.
And the ironclad law of communication that underpins this is the person asking the questions controls the conversation.
Think about the actual theater of going to a doctor's office. It really is a masterclass in authority and control.
It really is, isn't it?
Yeah. When you work into a clinic with a terrible pain in your stomach, the doctor doesn't burst into the room, shake your hand aggressively, and start rapid-fire pitching you on a brand new, highly expensive surgery they just learned how to do.
If they did, you would run out of the building.
Right. You would think they were a lunatic. It would be literal malpractice.
Exactly. What does the doctor actually do?
They sit down, they exude this calm, unbothered authority, they look you in the eye, and they start asking highly targeted questions.
Where exactly does it hurt?
Right. How long has it been hurting? Does it hurt more after you eat?
They might take out a clipboard and take notes. They listen intensely. They don't interrupt.
And only after they have conducted a thorough, exhaustive diagnosis of your unique pain do they finally lean back and prescribe a customized solution.
In any negotiation or sales environment, you must assume that exact same calm, clinical, diagnostic posture.
But the prospect isn't just going to hand you the diagnosis right away. You still have to draw it out of them.
True.
And Tracy talks about leveraging a psychological vulnerability here, tapping into what psychologists call the Freudian slip.
Yes, the Freudian slip.
It almost sounds like a Jedi mind trick when you read it, but it's really just based on the fact that human beings are profoundly uncomfortable with silence.
We really are. We are conditioned to view conversational silence as a threat, like a sign of social rupture. But the doctor of selling weaponizes that silence.
How does that work in practice?
The technique is simple, but it requires massive discipline. When you ask a question and the prospect answers, you do not immediately jump in with your next point.
Just wait.
You lean forward slightly, you maintain soft eye contact, you nod, you smile, and you just wait. You let the silence hang in the air for 3, 4, even 5 agonizing seconds.
That feels like an eternity in a business meeting. And what happens in that vacuum?
The prospect's brain panics slightly. They feel an overwhelming social pressure to fill the void.
Because no one likes awkward silence.
Right. And because people are naturally preoccupied with their own problems, if you give them a safe, silent space, they will often start rambling just to break the tension.
Oh, wow.
And in that rambling, they will inevitably blurt out the exact truth they were trying to hide. Say, well, our current vendor is okay, but honestly, my boss is breathing down my neck about the Q3 numbers, and I'm terrified we are going to miss the deadline.
Boom, you just found the cherry tree.
Exactly. The fear of the boss.
It's incredible. But let's look at the dark side of this for a second. Let's play out the nightmare scenario.
Okay, let's hear it.
You walk in, you try to put on your calm doctor persona, and before you can even ask your first diagnostic question, the prospect crosses their arms, glares at you, and just throws up a massive brick wall.
It happens all the time.
They say, look, I've got 5 minutes. Your stuff costs way too much, and we don't have the budget anyway.
Yeah, it's rough.
The natural human reflex is to immediately go on the defensive, right? To start arguing about value or offering discounts right out of the gate.
And the second you start arguing, you have lost the frame completely.
You're not the doctor anymore.
No, you are a desperate vendor begging for scraps. When a prospect hits you with a reflex objection like price, Tracy introduces a technique that might be the single most elegant verbal judo move in the entire book.
What is it?
When they say, it costs too much, you don't flinch. You pause for a second, look at them with genuine, mild curiosity, and you ask 4 words. How do you mean?
Just, how do you mean?
That's it. It costs too much. Pause.
How do you mean?
Or, we're completely happy with our current supplier. Pause. How do you mean?
Why does that specific phrase work so well? It seems almost too simple.
Because it forces a cognitive shift in the prospect's brain. The initial objection, it costs too much, is usually just a reflex.
Like a defense mechanism.
Exactly. It's an automatic defense mechanism generated by System 1 thinking, the fast emotional part of the brain. They probably say it to everyone who walks in the door.
Right.
But when you ask, how do you mean, you refuse to accept the reflex. You force their brain to engage System 2, the analytical part of the brain, to actually construct a coherent explanation.
You make them work for it.
Yes. It forces them to elaborate and add context to a generic statement.
So they can't just hide behind a slogan anymore.
Exactly. They have to unpack it. They might sigh and say, well, my department only has $20,000 left in discretionary spending for the entire year, and your base package is $25,000.
Ah, I see.
Notice what just happened there. You are no longer fighting a vague emotional wall about cost. You have isolated a highly specific mathematical puzzle.
A $5,000 gap in discretionary spending.
Yes. And that is actionable information. You can work with that. Maybe you can defer billing. Maybe you can split the cost across 2 departments by asking, how do you mean? You instantly defuse the confrontation and put yourself on the same side of the table as them, looking at the problem together.
It's brilliant because it removes all the combative energy from the room.
Completely.
Now, being a master diagnostician and using verbal judo is fantastic, but it is completely useless if you are performing it in an empty room or if you are talking to someone who genuinely cannot afford the treatment anyway.
That is very true.
Which forces us to look at the absolute hardest, most grueling part of any business, prospecting. Finding the right people to talk to in the first place.
Prospecting is where 90% of the emotional burnout happens. It's where the fear of rejection is at its absolute highest.
So how does Tracy handle that?
He reframes prospecting entirely through the lens of creative selling.
Creative selling. Now, we need to define our terms here because when most people hear creative, they think of an artist painting on a canvas or a musician writing a song.
Right, they think it's about being flamboyant or weird.
But that's not what he means, is it?
No, Tracy defines creativity in business very narrowly. Creativity is simply improvement.
Improvement.
It is using your intelligence to figure out how to spend more of your limited time with vastly better prospects. Because in sales, the ultimate application of the Pareto principle is the rule of whales and minnows.
Meaning you can spend all day, every day, exhausting yourself catching 1,000 tiny minnows.
Yes.
You are working incredibly hard, you are sweating, but at the end of the day, all you have is a bucket of smelly bait fish that barely feeds you.
But if you figure out how to catch one single whale...
That one transaction feeds the whole village for a year.
Exactly. And the stark reality is, catching a whale often takes the exact same amount of time, the exact same presentation, and the exact same paperwork as catching a minnow.
Wow, really? The same amount of work?
Very often, yes. One key prospect, like a massive corporate account, might be worth 100 times the revenue of a small mom-and-pop shop. But it doesn't take 100 times the effort to close them.
So what's the catch?
Therefore, your creativity must be aggressively directed at 2 things. Identifying who those whales are, and then figuring out how to break through their massive, heavily fortified walls of preoccupation to actually get their attention.
Because whales are surrounded by armor.
Exactly.
They have gatekeepers, they get hundreds of emails a day, everybody wants a piece of their budget, they are entirely preoccupied with their own survival.
And breaking that preoccupation is the real trick.
And there is a story in the book that is perhaps the most vivid illustration of breaking that preoccupation I have ever heard. It's the safety glass story.
Oh, I love this one.
I really want to spend some time on this because the psychology behind it is so profound.
It is a masterpiece of pattern interruption.
So set the scene for us.
So the setting is decades ago when a company called Corning Glass had just invented safety glass. Before this, all glass was incredibly dangerous. If a window or a windshield broke, it shattered into deadly, jagged shards.
Right, super dangerous.
But Corning figured out how to sandwich a thin layer of transparent plastic between 2 sheets of glass so that if it took an impact, it would spiderweb and crack, but it wouldn't shatter.
It was a revolutionary technology.
It was. But this young salesman who was hired to sell it was failing miserably.
Because nobody believed him.
Exactly.
It sounded like science fiction. I mean, if a guy walks into your office and says, I have magical glass that doesn't break, your logical brain immediately rejects it as a lie.
Right. He was trying to explain the polymer layers and the manufacturing process, the is of the product, and the prospects were just politely nodding and throwing his brochures in the trash.
He couldn't break their preoccupation.
No. So he decided to get creative. He went to a hardware store and bought a heavy iron ball-peen hammer.
Or a hammer.
Okay. Then he went to the factory floor and had them cut him a stack of 6-inch square samples of this new safety glass.
He arms himself.
He does. And the next time he gets a meeting with a busy executive, he walks in, doesn't say a word about polymers, and just asks one question. Would you like to see a piece of glass that doesn't shatter?
And the executive says.
The executive, annoyed, inevitably sighs and says, I don't believe there is such a thing.
Okay, here we go.
At which point, the salesman calmly places a piece of the glass directly onto the executive's beautiful, expensive mahogany desk. He pulls the heavy iron hammer out of his jacket, raises it high in the air, and brings it down on the glass with every ounce of strength he has. Whack!
Oh my God, you can just imagine the sheer visceral terror of the executive in that moment.
Pure terror.
His brain is screaming. The reticular activating system, the part of the brain responsible for detecting sudden threats, just overrides everything else.
Everything.
He probably physically jumped out of his chair and threw his hands over his face to protect his eyes from the flying shrapnel.
It is the ultimate neurological pattern interrupt. The executive is terrified for about 1 second. But he uncovers his eyes, looks down at his desk, and sees that the glass is completely intact.
It's cracked, but it didn't shatter.
Exactly. The desk isn't ruined. No one is bleeding.
Wow.
In that 1 second, the executive's preoccupation with his emails, his budget, his next meeting, it is entirely obliterated. He is now 100% physically and emotionally engaged with what is sitting on his desk.
The salesman doesn't even have to pitch anymore.
The demonstration did the selling, and predictably, that young salesman became the highest-earning rep in the entire country his very first year.
And what's amazing is he later refined the technique to be even more engaging, didn't he?
He did.
Because hitting it himself was a great spectacle, but it's still passive for the buyer. Eventually, he would put the glass on the desk, hand the heavy hammer directly to the executive, step back, and say, you hit it.
Which is pure genius, because now it involves physical, kinesthetic engagement.
They have to do it themselves.
The executive feels the weight of the hammer, feels the tension of breaking a taboo by smashing something in a nice office. And when they strike the glass and it holds, the conviction is absolute. The sale is closed in their mind before they even discuss price.
So if we pull back from the literal hammer, the lesson for you, the listener, is really profound.
Yes.
Because you obviously cannot walk into a modern corporate office and start smashing things. Security will escort you out immediately.
Definitely do not do that.
But it means that your opening statement, your very first email line, your first 30 seconds on a call, must function as a metaphorical ball-peen hammer.
It has to snap them out of it.
It cannot be, hi, I'm checking in to see if you have any bandwidth to synergize. That is just static.
It has to be a statement or a question so provocative, so directly tied to their deepest fear of loss or desire for gain, that it snaps their reticular activating system to attention.
But that is incredibly hard to write. How does a normal person just staring at a blank Word document actually generate a metaphorical hammer like that?
Tracy provides a highly disciplined cognitive tool for this exact problem. He calls it the 20-idea method, or mindstorming.
Mindstorming, okay.
And it is arguably the most valuable daily habit outlined in the book, because it forces the brain to break out of its lazy, comfortable neural pathways.
How does it work?
Here is how it works. You take a physical, blank sheet of paper. At the top of the page, you write down a problem, but you frame it as a highly specific, measurable question.
Give me an example.
You do not write, how can I sell more? That's too vague. The brain won't process it. You write something like, what is a 10-second opening statement that will guarantee my ideal prospect drops their phone and asks me, how exactly do you do that?
And then you just brainstorm answers.
But the critical constraint is in the name. You must force yourself to write 20 distinct answers before you get up from the table. You cannot stop at 10.
Why 20?
The psychology of this constraint is fascinating. The first 5 answers are incredibly easy. They just flow out of you.
Because they're the obvious ones.
Right. They are top of mind. They are the cliches you already used, the things you read in a blog post last week. They are useless because they are conventional.
Okay.
Answers 6 through 10 get a little harder. You have to start actually thinking.
And by the time you hit 15?
By the time you hit 15, you are hitting a cognitive wall. You are physically sweating. Your brain is begging you to stop, telling you that you've run out of ideas, that this is stupid.
I've been there.
But this friction is exactly where the magic happens.
Yeah.
You are forcing your brain to forge entirely new neural connections. You are digging into the deepest, most creative reserves of your subconscious.
So the good stuff is at the bottom.
Yes. And very often it is the 19th or the 20th answer that emerges from that struggle that is the absolute breakthrough. It's the idea that seems crazy at first, but is actually the ball-peen hammer.
That is so cool.
Tracy argues that if you do this exercise every single morning before you start work, you are generating over 5,000 ideas a year.
And you don't need 5,000 hammers.
You only need one. You only need one truly great one to completely alter the trajectory of your entire career.
It is the ultimate exercise in intellectual stamina. Okay, so let's construct the narrative so far. You've worked on your inner game. You've mindstormed a brilliant, provocative opening statement. You've broken the whale's preoccupation with your hammer. You are sitting in their beautiful office, and you are asking diagnostic questions like a master physician.
Right. You're doing everything right.
You are doing everything right on paper. But we arrive at concept 5, which deals with a pretty harsh reality. Logic, great questions, and even a great product are still not enough if the prospect simply doesn't like the way you look or act.
Oh, this is a tough one for a lot of people.
This is the power of suggestion and what Tracy calls the friendship factor.
This is often the hardest pill for highly analytical, deeply logical people to swallow.
Why is that?
Because they want the world to be a pure meritocracy of ideas. But human biology just doesn't care about meritocracy.
No, it doesn't.
Tracy points out that modern customers are overwhelmed, they are spoiled for choice, and they are inherently disloyal. They have a dozen vendors begging for their business every week.
Right.
Because the products are often very similar, the deciding factor shifts entirely to the human relationship.
Friendship factor.
Exactly. The friendship factor dictates that a prospect will absolutely not buy from you until they are subconsciously convinced of two things: that you are genuinely their friend and that you are acting in their best interest, not just trying to extract a commission.
And that subconscious assessment isn't happening based on the words you say, right? It's happening based on thousands of microscopic nonverbal cues.
Exactly. Evolutionary psychology tells us that when early humans met a stranger from another tribe, they had to assess within a fraction of a second whether this person was a threat or an ally.
Because if they took too long to analyze the stranger's words, they might get a rock to the head.
Right. And we still have that exact same threat detection hardware running in our brains today. We assess trustworthiness primarily through visual and physical data.
Like what?
Posture, eye contact, grooming, tone of voice, and physical touch.
And the book has some painful examples of this going wrong, where a salesperson's nonverbal signals are entirely out of sync with the culture they're trying to sell into. There's that story of the salesman originally from India.
Yes, this is a perfect example of a cultural mismatch triggering those ancient threat detection alarms.
What's happened?
So this man was highly intelligent, he represented a fantastic product, and he knew his technical material cold. But he was failing miserably in the American market. He couldn't close a deal to save his life.
Okay.
Finally, out of desperation, he asked a senior manager to shadow him on a sales call. And the manager diagnosed the fatal flaw in the first 5 seconds of the meeting.
What was it?
In the salesman's native culture, a firm, aggressive handshake was not the standard way business professionals greeted each other. It might even be seen as rude or overly aggressive.
Okay, so what was he doing?
So when he met with American executives, he was offering a very soft, limp handshake.
But in the context of American corporate culture, a handshake is a massive subconscious signaling mechanism.
Massive.
It's originally derived from Roman times to show you didn't have a weapon up your sleeve. And in the modern era, a firm handshake signals confidence, equality, and trustworthiness.
Right. And a limp handshake is subconsciously registered by the American buyer as a lack of confidence, weakness, or even a lack of integrity.
So they didn't trust him.
The prospects couldn't articulate why they didn't want to buy from him. If you asked them, they would probably invent a logical excuse about the pricing being slightly off.
But the truth was, their mammalian brain just felt off about him from the moment they touched hands.
Exactly. Once the manager taught him the cultural mechanics of a firm, confident handshake, looking them in the eye, smiling, gripping firmly, his close rate skyrocketed.
It wasn't his product that improved, it was his physical signaling.
Yep.
The book also brings up the salesman with the long, shaggy hair in the 1970s who couldn't figure out why conservative bankers wouldn't trust him with their financial portfolios.
Same exact principle.
Now, I know there are people listening right now who are bristling at this.
Oh, I'm sure they are.
They are saying, this is exactly what is wrong with corporate culture. It shouldn't matter if I have a beard or tattoos or what brand of shoes I wear. If my math is right and my software is the fastest, punishing me for my appearance is superficial and biased.
And they are completely right. It is superficial. It is biased.
Good.
But Tracy's argument is rooted in pragmatism, not idealism. You cannot fight millions of years of human evolutionary biology and decades of cultural conditioning during a 30-minute pitch meeting.
You just don't have the time.
You don't. Tracy operates on an absolute rule.
Yeah.
Everything counts.
Everything counts.
In the psychology of persuasion, there is no such thing as a neutral element. Every single thing you do, say, wear, or project, is either moving the prospect slightly closer to trusting you or pushing them slightly further away.
That's intense.
There is a well-documented cognitive bias called the halo effect. To conserve energy, the human brain generalizes. If a prospect sees that your shoes are highly polished, your suit fits perfectly, and your briefcase is organized, their brain assumes a halo of competence around you.
They subconsciously assume your company's customer service is equally sharp and your product is equally high quality.
Yes.
But the reverse is also true, right? The horns effect.
Yes, the horns effect.
If you show up with a coffee stain on your tie, scuffed shoes, and you have to fumble through a messy bag just to find a pen,
their brain immediately generalizes that incompetence. They assume that if you can't even manage your own shoes, your company's probably going to bungle the installation of their software.
Wow.
Your visual appearance strikes the prospect's subconscious mind like a massive, undeniable wave hitting a breakwater. You cannot argue against the wave with logic. You have to align with it.
You have to dress and act exactly like the kind of person your prospect expects an expert in your field to look like. You have to remove all visual friction.
Exactly. Remove the friction.
Okay, so let's say you've mastered all of this. You look immaculate. Your handshake is perfect. You've diagnosed the cherry tree. The prospect likes you. They trust you. The logic is sound.
The perfect setup.
You have run the absolute perfect marathon, and you are 10 feet from the finish line. This brings us to concept 6. Making the sale. And this is the most tragic part of the entire profession because this is where a shocking number of people just stop running and collapse before crossing the tape.
It is the great irony of the industry.
Why does it happen?
The single biggest obstacle to the final close isn't the competitor's pricing, it isn't a feature gap, and it isn't the economy. The final boss is the salesperson's own suddenly resurrected fear of rejection.
It comes back right at the end.
Yes. They have done all this incredible emotional labor. They get to the moment where money actually has to exchange hands, their heart rate spikes, the cortisol floods their system, and they just freeze.
They freeze.
They are so terrified that the prospect might finally say the word no after an hour of pleasant conversation that they simply don't ask a direct closing question. They waffle.
They say something weak like, "So, what do you think?" Or, "How does all this sound to you?"
Exactly. And the prospect, who is also feeling the tension of having to make a high-stakes financial decision, senses that hesitation.
They feel the weird vibe.
The prospect wants an escape hatch to relieve the pressure, and the salesperson has just handed it to them on a silver platter.
So what does the prospect say?
The prospect smiles politely and delivers the most lethal phrase in business. You know, this all sounds really great. I really like what you've shown me. Let me just take some time to think it over.
And Tracy admits with total humility that in his early days, he fell for this hook, line, and sinker.
Oh, we all do it first.
He would feel a wave of relief that they didn't say no. He would say, "Absolutely, take all the time you need. I'll leave this brochure with you, and I'll give you a call next Tuesday to see what you've decided."
Right.
And he would walk out of the office feeling like he had a sale in the bag. But what actually happens when he calls them next Tuesday?
Next Tuesday rolls around, he calls the office, and he can't get past the receptionist.
Ghosted.
The prospect is in a meeting. He calls Wednesday. The prospect is traveling. When he finally gets them on a phone 2 weeks later, the prospect sounds confused.
They've forgotten him.
They've completely forgotten who he is. They don't remember the cherry tree. They don't remember the ROI calculations. They barely remember the product.
So what's the lesson there?
Tracy delivers a very harsh truth here. People do not think it over.
They don't.
No. The absolute second you walk out of their office door, the massive weight of their own life, their emails, their demanding boss, their sick kids at home, crashes back down on them.
Their preoccupation returns.
The space you occupied in their brain is instantly overridden. Let me think it over. It's not a request for time. It is a polite, professional, socially acceptable way of saying goodbye forever.
It makes me think of going out to a truly incredible, world-class restaurant.
Oh, this is a great analogy.
Imagine you've had a long week, you are starving, and you walk into this famous steakhouse. The lighting is low and perfect. You hear the jazz playing. You can smell the wood smoke and the steaks searing on the grill.
You're setting the scene.
The waiter hands you a leather-bound menu. You are reading the descriptions of the food, and your mouth is literally watering. Your emotional desire to eat that steak is at a 10 out of 10.
You're at the absolute peak of the emotional wave.
Right. Now imagine looking up at the waiter, handing the menu back and saying, you know what, this sounds absolutely amazing. I really love this menu, but let me just take this menu home and think it over.
It's an absurd scenario when you frame it like that.
Because what happens? You leave the ambiance of the restaurant, you go home, you are tired, you open your fridge and eat a bowl of cold cereal over the sink. By the time you wake up the next morning, the emotional momentum, the visceral craving for that steak dinner is completely and totally gone. You aren't going to get in your car and drive 30 minutes back to the restaurant on a Tuesday morning. The window of opportunity closed.
That is the perfect analogy. The emotional desire to buy the vision of the cherry tree peaks right there in the room during the presentation. When the pain of their problem and the relief of your solution are both crystal clear and present.
It's lightning in a bottle.
If you let them leave the restaurant without ordering, that emotional state dissipates into the atmosphere, and you can never artificially recreate it over the phone a week later.
So knowing that "let me think it over" is a death sentence, how do we prevent it? Because you can't hold them hostage in the office. You can't force them to sign.
No, you can't. But you can change the rules and engagement before the tension ever builds.
How so?
Tracy introduces a technique called the approach close, and it is designed to completely eliminate the think it over escape route before you even open your laptop or show a single slide.
How does the mechanics of that work? I need to know this.
It requires confidence.
Yeah.
Right at the beginning of the meeting, after you have broken their preoccupation and built a little rapport, you explicitly set the terms of the meeting.
What do you say?
You say something along these lines. Mr. Prospect, thank you for your time. All I ask today is that you look at what I have to show you with a completely open mind. I'm not here to pressure you. All I ask is that at the end of our conversation, you just tell me simply yes or no if this makes sense for your business. Is that fair?
Wow. Just tell me yes or no if this makes sense. Is that fair?
Yes. You are offering them a very attractive psychological trade.
A trade.
You are trading a low-pressure, informative presentation. You are explicitly promising not to badger them in exchange for a definitive decision at the end of the hour.
And they take that deal.
Almost every prospect will agree to that up front because it sounds perfectly reasonable and it actually takes the pressure off them in the moment. They think, great, I could just say no at the end.
But psychologically, you have just built a fence around the end of the meeting.
Precisely. You have fenced them in. You present your case, you find the cherry tree, you supply the logic. When you get to the end of the meeting, the tension rises. The prospect might instinctively reach for the escape hatch and say, this looks good, let me think it over.
But they can't.
Because you set the terms up front, you can gently, professionally smile and say, Mr. Prospect, if you recall, we agreed at the beginning that you would just tell me yes or no if this made sense for you. Based on everything we've discussed about solving your Q3 budget problem, does this make sense?
Oh, that is so smooth.
They can still say no. And if they say no, you accept it and move on. But they cannot say, let me think it over, without breaking a direct social contract they made with you.
That is brilliant.
And if you have done your job properly as the doctor is selling, and the logic aligns with the emotion, the friction of saying no is actually higher than the friction of saying yes.
It is an incredibly elegant way to force a moment of truth without being aggressive. It's just holding them to an agreement.
Exactly.
So as we zoom out from the specific tactics, the hammer, the silence, the approach, close, I really want to look at how all these moving parts fit together into a cohesive architecture. Because reading a list of tips is one thing, but Tracy's presenting a complete operating system here.
The true brilliance of Tracy's framework is that it is a closed-loop system.
A closed loop.
It is a continuous, self-reinforcing upward spiral. all based on that law of cause and effect we discussed at the very beginning.
Walk us through the spiral.
You start internally. You do the hard, uncomfortable work of using affirmations and visualization to fix your mental thermostat. You raise your baseline expectation of what you deserve.
Okay, Ted.
Because you do that, the reactor core of your self-esteem runs hot.
You aren't operating from a place of fear or desperation anymore.
Exactly. And because you aren't desperate, you have the emotional bandwidth to act like a true professional.
You're not throwing mud against the wall.
Right. You are using the 20-idea method to find the whales, and you are approaching them with the calm, relaxed authority of a doctor of selling.
Diagnosing the pain.
Because you are calm, you have the patience to ask the right diagnostic questions and use silence to uncover their true emotional hot button, their cherry tree.
And then you pitch.
Once you find it, you present your product not as a list of features, but as the logical, undeniable bridge to their emotional desire.
And you've already set up the close.
Right. And because you've mastered the friendship factor and secured the approach close up front, you don't freeze at the end. You confidently ask for the order.
And when they say yes.
When they say yes, the loop completes itself. Winning that sale gives your nervous system a massive hit of dopamine and endorphins. Your self-esteem spikes even higher.
And the thermostat goes up again.
And the entire cycle starts over again the next morning. But this time, you're operating from a higher, more successful baseline. You are literally evolving your psychology with every single closed deal.
It is an incredibly powerful system. I mean, it really is. So let's talk about the practical application of this. Who is this material actually for? If someone is listening right now, how do they know if this is the intervention they need?
I would break the audience down into 3 distinct groups who will extract massive value from this, but in very different ways.
Okay, who is group 1?
First, for the beginner or the salesperson who is currently struggling and feeling hopeless, this philosophy is a psychological lifesaver.
Because it protects them.
Yes. If you are terrified of picking up the phone, if you feel a physical knot in your stomach when you get rejected, Tracy's focus on the inner game gives you the tools to build psychological armor.
That's huge.
It teaches you how to detach your personal worth from the outcome of a pitch. It helps you reframe a no not as a devastating personal attack, but just as a statistical reality. It's just part of the weather.
Just part of the weather. I like that framing. It really takes the sting out of it. And what about for the veteran, the person who is already in the top 20%?
For the seasoned professional or the entrepreneur running a business, this is a masterclass in absolute operational efficiency.
Getting that winning edge.
Exactly. When you are already doing well, it's easy to get complacent. This framework forces you to audit your behavior ruthlessly.
Oh, so?
It forces you to ask, am I spending 60 hours a week fishing for minnows when I could spend 10 hours mindstorming away to catch one whale? Am I accidentally slipping back into selling what my product is instead of what it does?
So it's about leverage.
For the veteran, this isn't about surviving. It's about finding that fractional 3% winning edge that doubles their income without doubling their hours.
And I think there is a massive third category here.
Yeah.
The non-salesperson.
Oh, absolutely.
The person who doesn't carry a quota, who doesn't have account executive in their title. Because the blunt reality is, like we said earlier, we are all in sales.
Every single one of us.
If you are a project manager trying to convince your engineering team to adopt a new workflow, you are in sales.
Yep.
If you are trying to negotiate a raise with a boss who is terrified of budget cuts, you are in sales. If you are trying to persuade your teenager to do their homework instead of playing video games, you are trying to figure out what drops into their bucket.
You're trying to find their cherry tree.
Exactly. The psychology of overcoming human resistance and inspiring action applies to literally every human interaction.
I couldn't agree more. Leadership, parenting, management, it is all just applied psychology. If you understand human motivation, if you understand that fear of loss drives people more than desire for gain, you have a massive strategic advantage in every area of your life.
Which leaves us with a final, slightly uncomfortable thought for you to mull over.
Uh-oh.
If Brian Tracy is right, and decades of behavioral science really suggest that he is, if 80% of your success in any persuasive endeavor is entirely mental and only 20% is the mechanical how-to, I want you to mentally audit your calendar right now.
That's a good challenge.
Look back at your schedule for this past week. Are you spending 80% or even 100% of your time just grinding away mechanically, sending emails, tweaking spreadsheets, memorizing product features, throwing mud against the wall, and spending absolutely 0% of your time actually programming your own mindset.
Most people are.
Because if your internal thermostat is broken, if your self-concept is holding you back, no amount of external hustle, no new software tool, and no brilliant script will ever keep the house warm. You have to fix the wiring first.
That is the ultimate takeaway.
We've covered some truly incredible ground today, diving deep into the neurochemistry and the psychology of persuasion, but we are genuinely just scratching the surface of what Brian Tracy's The Psychology of Selling has to offer.
Oh, we barely scratched the surface.
So if you had some aha moments listening today and you feel like this framework could genuinely help you break through your own income ceilings or improve your leadership or just help you communicate better with your family, there is a complete audio available.
Highly recommend it.
It's several hours long, and it covers absolutely every single chapter in profound depth with detailed explanations, dozens more of these amazing real-world examples, and step-by-step actionable takeaways for every part of the process.
I'll all in there.
If you want to go deeper and truly master this material, just check the link in the description. It's a completely natural next step for anyone serious about mastering the inner game.
It is a tremendous life-changing resource for anyone willing to actually put in the psychological work.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the art of the inner game. We'll catch you on the next one.
What you just listened was the beginning of a full audio, way longer, explaining every single chapter of the book. If you would like to keep listening to the end and access to the full audio, you can access it with the link down below in the description and in the pinned comment.